Tengo el gusto de presentarles nuestro siguiente eje, que es en currículo y evaluación. En un mundo donde la calidad de la educación es fundamental, es esencial no solo medir el conocimiento académico, sino también desarrollar habilidades socioemocionales que son vitales para el éxito, fomentando así una preparación integral de los estudiantes. Para ello nos acompaña Koji Miyamoto, quien hablará sobre evaluar y fomentar habilidades socioemocionales. Para ello, les invitamos, como les había mencionado, a utilizar sus equipos de traducción que están en la entrada. Koji es economista senior de práctica global de educación en el Banco Mundial. Anteriormente fue líder del proyecto de educación y progreso social de SERI y gestionaba formalmente el proyecto de resultados sociales del aprendizaje SOL de SERI. Démosle una calurosa bienvenida a Koji Miyamoto.
Buenas tardes. Until 1 hour ago, I thought I had two major disadvantages for my presentation. First one, end of the day. We're all quite tired, I know. Second, my Spanish is a little rusty. Of course, I had an opportunity to present you with my beautiful Japanese, or maybe my imperfect French. But I decided to go with my okay English. Of course, you know, because we have a wonderful interpreter in the back, who would do magics to my presentation by lifting up to the level of Dr. Hernan. So I will do my presentation. It's not going to be about, you're not going to see so much of my body movement, unfortunately. Maybe that's good for you. But I will be watching you. If I see any sign of sleepiness in your face, I think I will spray you with those 450 rainbows of emotions that we just saw, okay? So let me start with my presentation. So actually, before I start my presentation, let me express my thanks to the organizers who invited me to this fantastic event in Bogota. I'm really happy to be here. It's been years since I had a chance to visit Bogota or Colombia to talk with the major stakeholders of education, the principals, the coordinators, right, and other partners who strive to deliver a good education so that our children are empowered with a range of 21st century skills so that they can thrive in the 21st century. I'm really honored to have a chance to talk to you today. So today, my presentation is about measuring, evaluating, and fostering social and emotional skills in the context of Colombia. I would like to start my presentation with some facts to motivate you on this topic, okay? Some facts. I'm not so sure if you have read the results that came out from a study that has been done with the OECD and the municipality of Bogota and Manizales, which is designed to measure social and emotional skills in these two municipalities. Mind you, this data is mainly or exclusively on public school students. So let me give you a bit of context behind social and emotional skills in Colombia. What this study that the OECD and the municipality of Bogota and Manizales has shown is that in these jurisdictions, 15-year-old children's curiosity, creativity, and tolerance, three of the most important social and emotional capabilities of our children, went down between 2019 and 2022. Why would creativity, curiosity, and tolerance go down? Maybe you think about COVID. COVID had a detrimental effect in our lives in general. Maybe it had some effects on the social and emotional abilities of the children. There may be other reasons whereby these key social and emotional skills went down. It may be due to the changing environment. It may be due to the struggles that teachers, schools had in providing a social and emotionally enriching environment. So this is one fact. Social and emotional skills measures in Bogota and Manizales went down. Second, another fact that we found was that there were gender differences in the way in which students reported their social and emotional abilities, right? There were significant gender differences, as you can see. So on average, girls reported less stress resistance, and girls also experience more test and class anxiety than boys. Does that resonate with you? Do you think that's what you find in your classroom? This is the result from Bogota. It shows that gender differences were quite big, approximately 1 standard deviation differences. So there may be something behind the gender differences. And then the third findings that we see, also closely related to social and emotional ability, is that we find that many of our 15-year-olds, as well as 10-year-olds, don't sleep enough, right? You can see that in Bogota, almost 50% of the 15-year-olds slept less than 8 hours, right? Again, why? Maybe they're just working hard at night, or maybe they were busy with something else, right? Lastly, another important fact. You may be aware about the challenges behind bullying. What we find from this study is that both in Bogota and Manizales in 2019, there were quite a large proportion of 15-year-olds who reported that they've been bullied multiple times and more over the last month, right? Almost 1/3 of kids, 15-year-olds, in Bogota and Manizales reported they've been bullied multiple times over the last month. I'm sorry, that was 10-year-old. And then about 1/5 of 15-year-old reported that. Again, these are another context that would have an important implication on children's social and emotional conditions. So please keep these facts in mind as I go through the presentation. So I will go through 3 parts. The first is that social and emotional skills, the importance of social and emotional skills in the age of digital transformation. I think some of the speakers earlier today had already talked about some of the impact of digital transformation in our learning environment. After that, I'm also going to talk about the importance of taking a holistic approach to social and emotional skill development. And then lastly, I would like to zoom into one of the main topics today. It is the evaluation. How do we measure and evaluate to foster social and emotional skills? So this will be the main theme of my presentation. I'll start with number 1. Now, before talking about digital transformation, let me first make sure that we're on the same page. when we speak about social emotional skills, many people have an opinion about social emotional skills. I also have an opinion, okay? And I've been talking to many different experts, educators, principals, policymakers in different countries. And to me, this is perhaps the most common way of describing social emotional abilities. It consists of 5 elements. The first one is the individual's capacity to engage with others. Communication, for example. The second one is the individual's capacity to care for others. It talks about the quality of communication. Empathy is one example. Third is the individual's capacity to work towards goals. The capacity to plan, the capacity to persist in order to achieve goals. That's number 3. Number 4, importantly, also including the animating presentation before, is the ability to manage emotions, right? Self-esteem, emotional resistance. There are many things that comes in here. Last but not least, a very important element of social and emotional skills is the ability to explore new horizons, to be open, to explore new ideas, right? Curiosity, critical thinking, right? Are all included in here, okay? So you can see that the social emotional ability of human beings, especially our children, have multi-dimensional elements to it. Now, of course, I do not think that you have any doubt about the powers of social emotional skills. I think you are all believers that social emotional skills can play a role in our daily lives. Social emotional skills play an important role in the labor market. A worker will be able to function much better with strong collaboration skills, persistence, curiosity, for example. There's tons of evidence suggesting that the powers of social emotional skills, the returns to social emotional learning on the individual's labor market and society, right? So not only having more higher levels of social emotional skills make you become a better worker, it also makes me much better in managing my health-related lifestyles. Not drinking too much, not eating too much, perhaps. Social emotional skills obviously also has an impact on my ability to be an active citizen. I will be able to contribute to volunteering activities. I will be more likely to vote, right? Being part of the civil society. So there are lots and lots of evidence right now. But you probably all know about this. Now, so I wanted to ask, okay? So the question here is why? Why are social emotional skills so powerful in driving our daily lives, in driving our labor market performance, right? A short answer is that social emotional skills enhances our capacity to cope with challenging situations, as you see in the bottom. It also helps us reap the benefit of opportunities of the 21st century, okay? In terms of challenges, you may still remember the scars of the COVID pandemic. We've seen many instances, many evidences suggesting that those who had a much stronger emotional coping skills, openness to try out new things, had a much better ability to cope with COVID-related lockdowns. we just found an evidence from Thailand that those who had a much stronger social emotional skills were able to shift to a remote working when the COVID pandemic started. This was the case in Thailand. It makes sense, but we also have evidence. We also are faced with lots of opportunities in the 21st century. One is the transition to a more ecological, green society. It may not be very easy to shift to a different mode of living, but with some openness, right? Some flexibility to embrace the new world, it may be much more easier to leverage such opportunities. So I hope this resonates with you, the powers of social and emotional skills. But then I also wanted to talk about one important trend that we have been facing, especially during these years. So this is the force of digital transformation, right? The force of digital transformation. Of course, many of you are leading schools, private schools in Colombia, and you're preparing your children so that they can get very good jobs and be a good citizen. So imagine one of your students after graduating from your secondary school going to a job interview, right? Going to a job interview. As you know, the force of digital transformation, partly driven by artificial intelligence, has been suggesting that many of the tasks that we do in the labor market and the society have become automated, right? So there are increasing number of tasks, right? Like typing, like translating, right? Like making new files. Those are increasingly being automated, sometimes using robots, computers, AI. This you probably already know very well. Now, the interesting findings these days is that there's an increasing number of tasks that can also be automated using the artificial intelligent technologies. We've already seen emerging powers of ChatGPT in performing tasks that involve emotional awareness. There's been researchers already also putting ChatGPT to the test of situational judgments, and they actually perform as well as human subjects. Another example that you can see here, I don't know if you can figure out what's happening here. So this is a picture of an elderly care home in Japan, my home country. Several years ago, there was a company that had prepared a robot, AI-infused robot called Paro. And it actually has this ability to interact with the people who spend time in elderly homes. And it has the ability to undertake some of the tasks that typically require empathy, for example. And this robot has shown very good results, actually, in reducing the risks of dementia among the elderly adults, and also the capacity to cope with dementia and Alzheimer's. So there's been a lot of promise, at least that's what I see, in the powers of digital transformation in also covering the tasks that involve social and emotional skills. So coming back to this picture, right? So we're preparing our children in your schools with 21st century skills. with a strong set of literacy, numeracy, digital skills, and social-emotional skills. At the same time, these students are also surrounded by, yes, robots who can perform quite well in all those tasks. So what's the implication of that? What is the implication of that? Do we still need to enforce social and emotional learning to these kids or not? That is the question. I wanted to give you 2 examples to illustrate the fact that, of course, this force of digital transformation tells us that gives us even more importance of fostering social and emotional skills. It gives more reasons to strengthen 21st century skills of our children. I don't know if you can make sense out of this picture. I unfortunately go to airports very often. So one thing that I observe as the outcomes of digital transformation is the increasing evolution of airports. Of course, in the old days, we had long lines of check-in desks where they accept bags, right? They check your passport, they take your bag, they weigh it, they give you back the boarding pass. Right now, this is a photo from Tokyo International Airport in my country, right? Many of the places are completely automated with AI robots. So you as a passenger go to the airport, scan your passport, and then you're asked to put your bag. And then they measure the bag, they weigh the bag, and they give you the boarding pass, right? So this is one thing that you see. Now, the question is, with these kind of digital transformation, do you need people? You need people. Well, you can see one person here. Actually, you still do need people. Whatever the force of digital transformation replaces certain tasks with automated robots, there is still a need to have human beings, but not only have human beings who would troubleshoot if the machine doesn't read it doesn't read your passport very well, efficiently. If the machine doesn't quite figure out what to do with your oversized luggage, this person can troubleshoot that. But this person can also make judgments about different personal situations of the passenger. This passenger may be 30 minutes before the flight leaves, right? This passenger may be having difficulty scanning her passport, right? We need to have a person who will be able to exercise judgment, who would be able to show empathy to a nervous customer, a nervous passenger, right? To be able to effectively direct. So there's always a role, an important role that human beings can play. And an important role of the human being almost always involves social and emotional abilities. I'll skip this one just to save time. Another force of digital transformation is the rise of disinformation or misinformation. I think some of our colleagues have talked about that during today's session, right? So what is the role of social and emotional skills in the age of disinformation? What is the role of social and emotional skills in the age where we are quite, spending so much time on digital devices, right? Huge screen time is another important patterns that we observe. Obviously, the key under this kind of circumstance is that individuals need a much stronger capacity to exercise constraint, right? Self-control. Individuals have to have the capacity to exercise ethical judgments, right? of competing information that are out there. Individuals need to show much stronger empathy in this kind of world. So again, another example of the consequence of digital transformation where we need even stronger set of social and emotional skills to go through this era. The key is, that would help us benefit from digital transformation, right? Digital transformation can provide a lot of benefits, a lot of advantage to our lives. And social and emotional skills can help us achieve that. So, I've been talking a lot, but then, do the employers agree to what I've been saying? Right? Do the employers agree that social and emotional skills are really important in the age of digital transformation? Well, there was a survey done by the World Economic Forum last year. They asked about the top 10 skills in the year. Right? Not surprisingly, the top skill included analytical thinking. And I know that you guys are working on that skill at your schools. There's no surprise that technological literacy is also a very important top skill in this century. But what's really struck me was the number of skills that employers, and these are top employers, including top employers from around the world, they had highlighted a range of social and emotional abilities that we've been discussing about. Creativity, resilience, motivation, curiosity, empathy, being able to depend on others. All these social and emotional skills are really sought after by employers from around the world. Okay? So the employers agree. By the way, the employers also agree about the threat of digital transformation, right? The employers also agree that among the top 10 risks that they perceive in running businesses in 2024 includes disinformation and misinformation. Again, so the employers, the labor market seems to agree with the importance of social and emotional skills in the age of digital transformation. So, now that we've clarified the significance of social and emotional skills in our society, let's move on to the next section, which is to provide a holistic approach to fostering social and emotional skills. Now, sometimes when I discuss with policymakers, educators in other countries, the conversation almost exclusively focuses on particular skills. Most often on social and emotional skills, but sometimes on other skills. But of course, we don't deal with one particular skills. We are here because we are preparing kids for a range of competencies that would help them become successful citizens of the 21st century. So the point here is that, social and emotional skills must be discussed, must be fostered, must be measured together with other competencies, right? Social and emotional skills in itself is powerful, that's true, but it's even more powerful when taken together with different sets of skills, including literacy, numeracy, digital skills. The second element of the importance of taking a holistic approach is that social and emotional learning obviously can take place very well in school and classroom settings, but much of the social and emotional skills can be developed in the community, in the family, in other environment. Okay, And the effectiveness of fostering social and emotional skills depends on the coherence of the entire environment. That's what we find consistently across different countries, right? So even though our main remit may be to concentrate on improving primary and secondary schools, we also need to take into account what happens in our community and the classrooms. I think Dr. Henan had covered this part very well, actually until here, among many other things. But social and emotional skills need to be developed in a life cycle fashion, right? Skills beget skills, right? Some of the struggles that we're facing, for example, if you're a secondary school teacher trying to improve creativity and critical thinking at this time, if you're struggling there, part of the reason why you're struggling depends on what happened in the past, that the child didn't have a chance to develop some of these foundational abilities that would help him further benefit from social and emotional learning in high school. So we need to think always about social and emotional development in a life cycle manner. So finally, we come to social and emotional learning programs, social and emotional learning curricula, all these things. And when you look at the enormous market and even growing market of social and emotional learning, you can see a range of programs like this. The problem is that most of the programs are not called social and emotional learning. Some are disguised under the name of project-based learning, right? It may be called the experiential learning, action learning, problem learning, inquiry-based approach, right? There are many, they come in different names, different forms, but in fact, and these programs actually perform very well. There's been an increasing number of intervention programs designed to measure the effectiveness of these programs. And when the design is very well, when the teachers and the principals are well prepared, then quite often they perform well. Children are empowered, right? So we see so many of these packages out there. I want to say that, I'm not here to recommend any particular programs, but what I wanted to say is that there are common features behind these programs that makes them very, very successful. First, all the successful programs have an evidence base backed in the design and also the implementation, right? For example, one of the well-known evidence-based design is that they tend to have a sequenced approach. They also tend to involve active engagement in the process of learning. It tends to be focused, right? And it is also explicit. It targets specific social and emotional skills. And students and teachers are very, very aware of which skills that they're tackling in each of the activities. So there are many evidence that is supporting the importance of these principles. And then when it comes to SEL-focused classrooms, we also know that a supportive classroom climate helps a lot. Student needs to feel safe, right? Students need to feel that they're belonging to the classroom environment, to be part of the school culture. Another important element is that social and emotional learning needs to be integrated across academic instructions. Sometimes, when I discuss with schools in other countries again, they tell me that, we started introducing social emotional learning programs, project-based learning, for STEM teachers, because they think it's very important to improve the capacity of STEM teachers in delivering social emotional learning. But the truth is that this social emotional learning can and should be given across the whole subject, right? All the teachers should develop the capacity to deliver pedagogical practices conducive of children's development of social emotional skills. That is really the key. The focus should be on the school-wide approach to social emotional learning, not just about introducing one 50-minute session of social emotional skill course. It doesn't quite work like that. And I also mentioned before that SEL, social emotional learning instruction, needs to be very explicit. The children need to know exactly which skills that they are tackling in each of the courses that they take. So these are some of the secret behind successful social emotional learning programs that we observe from around the world. Now, so I wanted to give you a big picture, okay? Although my main objective is to focus on assessments, right? To foster assessments and evaluations to foster social emotional skills, you can't really talk about the role of evaluation without talking about the entire ecosystem of social emotional learning. So let me explain here. We need to first, even before considering delivering a particular social emotional learning program, as you can see here, you need to have a very good strategy, right? You need to develop a very strong strategy to be able to deliver something that works. The first step in delivering a viable strategy is to set learning objectives as well as learning standards. Maybe you obviously know about this, right? This is a very important element. But the question I have is that in your learning objectives, in the kind of learning standards that you have in your schools, do you have something very explicit on social emotional skills? I'm showing you an example of learning standards from one of the most progressive education systems in the US, which is the state of Illinois, where Chicago lies, right? So the state of Illinois has a social emotional learning standards clearly set. It's actually much longer than this. This is just an excerpt, just to give you an idea what it says, right? So one part of the social emotional learning standards says that, yes, we need to prepare our children that can use social awareness as well as interpersonal skills to establish and maintain positive relationship, right? Seems like a very reasonable learning goals, learning objectives, right? And it explains what that is. Do you have something like this in your schools? Maybe you do. If you do, let me know afterwards. So not only the schools in Illinois have a very concrete social emotional learning standards, they also have a clearly set guidelines of what are the kind of, the levels of social emotional capabilities that students will develop in early elementary, late elementary, and then high schools and onwards, right? It's very, very explicit, right? Recognizing that others may experience situations differently from oneself. From that to being able to express understanding of those who hold different opinions. Very important skills especially in the era of competing information. So again, do you have such learning objectives? Do you have such learning standards? I think it is very useful to explore these things so that the teachers, the students are very clear about what they are aiming at. And then we look at the other part of the strategy. Once we set a very strong and viable learning standards for social and emotional skills, we can move on to the next step. We need to identify whether the students have enough of that skills according to the learning objectives. What are the learning gaps, right? What are the gaps on average that your students have in your school against those goals that you have established before? Are there any particular groups, like boys, like those from a low-income household, maybe immigrants? Are there particular groups that are facing a significant gaps in achieving those learning goals? Those are the things you have to start thinking. And then, after you clarify what's the scale of the gaps that you have to narrow in terms of social and emotional skills, you have to think about why are there these gaps? Why are 50% of my children lack the capacity to manage emotions, right? Then you look at the what's going on in the classrooms, the curriculum, the school climate. You could also look at whether the teachers have the capacity to deliver a sound social and emotional learning environment. Are the teachers very stressed and lack the capacity to take into account social and emotional learning of children? Do the teachers have enough pedagogical skills to deliver social and emotional learning programs? These are the kind of things one must think before finally choosing the best approach, the package, the programs that you could consider delivering at your schools, right? Once you strategize very well, you move over to the right part. You can start first with a package that you find, right? Some of the packages may come from the US, particular institutions in the US, or you may be lucky to find very good package in Colombia or even in Mexico. And I've seen many of them, very good packages. So the first thing you do is once you identify a package, you need to think about adapting teaching and learning materials, right? To suit the context of your schools, to suit the context of your local environment. And then, very importantly, you need to train your teachers, right? Of course, the teachers play a central role in the success of everything, including social and emotional learning. So the teachers' training is really key before delivering the curriculum. And last but not least, once we start rolling out the curriculum, we start the process of formative assessments, right? Formative assessment, where students engage in learning, measure the progress, goes interactively, and then teachers have an opportunity to provide feedbacks. And then it's going to go, and all these efforts, all these evaluations based on the formative assessment will then provide you with the ideas to adjust the strategies, to optimize the strategies, to make it even better, right? And then you have this circular, virtuous circle going on. So it's actually a very, very long and complex process, it may seem, but each of the elements are very important to consider, okay? You can see that I've highlighted the parts that are relevant to evaluation and assessment, right? These are the aspects that are really important for the evaluation assessment. For example, identifying the learning gaps in the form of summative assessments. Evaluating the capacity of the teachers, also a very important aspect of the assessment and evaluation. And finally, the formative assessments. And that will be the last bit of my presentation. How do we evaluate to foster social and emotional skills? The key is that, of course, we're not evaluating to make a judgment of the student's social and emotional capability. We're evaluating so that we are sure to be able to develop children's social and emotional skills. Okay, so let me quickly go through the last part. So, I've already mentioned the importance of summative and formative assessments. Both are extremely important. Right? For summative assessment, what we can do is to identify those who need support, those who are struggling with social and emotional abilities. Right? We need to identify who are these people. We also need to identify the extent of the learning gaps that your children are facing. Right? Is there a huge gaps in the capacity to exercise creativity against your learning goals? Or is the gap like this? You need to make sense of those gaps. And I may be repeating, but you need to also identify the extent of the teacher's capacity, right? Also including the teacher's social and emotional abilities as well. For the formative assessments, we obviously need to evaluate the progress students are making, provide feedback to them, and then allow teachers to adapt instructions. So let me look at the summative assessment first. I will just illustrate to you some of the good examples of summative assessments that we see that can be applied to social and emotional skills, right? Maybe you know many of these summative assessments that captures academic skills. Here I'm focusing on the social and emotional skills summative assessments. So one good example of summative assessments to capture or to identify those who would benefit from strengthening social and emotional skills. And this can be girls. Again, this can be students from low socioeconomic status, right? But there's a way to do that. And one good way to do that is to use the instruments that have been produced by the OECD, together with the Bogota municipalities, which led to this report. And there's this concrete measure by the OECD, which covers the wide domains of skills that I had discussed at the beginning, the 5 domains, including things like curiosity, emotional coping. It is also a very good instrument, such that it measures the ability of children from the perspective of themselves, from the perspective of the parents and the teachers. It is a very holistic approach to measurement. What kind of questionnaire do they use? Just mind you, this is not the exact questionnaire that they used, the study by the OECD, but I brought something quite similar, okay? Just to give you the idea of what kind of questionnaire they use. So it's a self-report, right? You ask students to self-express on a 5-point scale, whether they plan out their time very well, whether the child could keep track of their promises and commitments, right? If they can control their temper, right? So all these questions, a range of questions that covers a wide range of social and emotional abilities, are covered in this questionnaire. And although there are often shortcomings related to these kind of questionnaire, self-reports. There are biases inherent in these measures, but at the end, there are methodologies also applied to circumvent those biases, and at the end, they have produced a measure and results that are psychometrically sound. So the results are very good. What I wanted to show you is some examples of the results that they showed from this OECD study. And these are the results from Bogota, okay? Results from Bogota. What you find, again, this is one example, is that socioeconomically advantaged students perform much higher levels of persistence, creativity, as well as many other skills, right? Maybe not surprising, right? I picked up in particular persistence and creativity, right? There's a huge socioeconomic gaps in the levels of creativity and persistence reported by children. And why this may pose a problem? It may pose a problem because these two skills, persistence and curiosity, are the important skills that also explain the differences in academic performance, right? So you see, the huge difference in these social-emotional skills, depending on the social-emotional status, may have an implication on the academic performance. This is what this result shows. Another example. So what is a good example of measurement scores that can be used for summative assessments to identify the levels of the gaps in social and emotional skills? Okay? And I just came up with one example. There are many examples of measurement tools that are out there. But this is one measurement tool that I thought worked very well. It's called CellWeb. Like the previous OECD assessment, CellWeb is designed to address a range of social and emotional skills. The coverage is very wide, a range of social and emotional skills, which is attractive. It uses a situational judgment, right? Situational judgment test to identify how students respond to a particular situation. In this case, yes, a situation where the football team of your class have lost. And so how would you respond to that particular real-life circumstance? And based on your reaction to this situation, there's a way to elicit students' skills. So that's what these diagnostics do. Okay? Again, another form of measuring social and emotional skills, which has a very good measurement properties. So the reason why this kind of tool is useful is that it provides the kind of diagnostics that would be very useful for educators, for schools and teachers. It shows the extent to which the proportion of your students who are performing very low, right, overall. It also shows the proportion of students who underperform across different type of skills, visually, right? And with these kind of information, constantly updated, the teachers have a capacity to respond, right, quickly to the skill gaps. Even better, you can also see the changes over time, right? So when you first made the assessment of particular gaps in social and emotional skills, it was very large. after 1 year, it went down, right? So you can see the changes in the learning gaps over time. So I think that this kind of tool is very useful, very informative for educators. I also wanted to mention another tool, and this is the tool that the World Bank has come up with. And this is a tool that can be useful for teachers, right? I repeat, teachers are the single most important agent for changes that happens, right, in the skills that children can develop, including social and emotional skills. So what this tool does, this tool is called Teach, and we have this tool for primary and secondary schools. What this tool does is to measure the pedagogical capacity of teachers in terms of improving the classroom climate, in terms of delivering quality instructions, as well as inducing children to develop social and emotional skills, right? So it actually directly measures teachers' capacity to foster these pedagogical abilities. For example, I don't know if you can read this. Yes. So one of the elements in terms of teachers' pedagogical ability is the teacher's ability to promote students' collaboration through peer interaction, right? So that's one element. But there are many other elements as well. So this is a standardized diagnostic tool by the World Bank. It actually films a typical classroom behaviors of teachers, and to see how, if a teacher is really responding in a way that is conducive to develop social and emotional skills. It also provides training to evaluators who could actually go across different schools and classrooms to make the evaluation. And by using this tool, you'll get a good picture of teachers' ongoing capacity to deliver the social and emotional learning. So let me just go fast, because the time is up. So just lastly, I wanted to explain the formative assessment. You know about formative assessment very well, so I'll go quickly. There are many ways to assess in a formative assessment setup, right? There are many different ways. Many of them are informal. But what I would like to focus on is these kind of assessments, peer and self-assessments, and those that involve diagnostic tools, right? These are some of the tools that are very effective in delivering formative assessments in a social and emotional skill setting. The tool that I had mentioned before, CellWeb, can actually also be used for formative assessment purposes. You can use these tools to measure children's current levels of social and emotional skills. You provide a diagnostics, show that to your students, show that to the teachers. They can make adjustments, the teachers can make adjustments, and then they can reassess and finally review, right? So there's, again, this circular formative elements you can introduce using such kind of tools. There are also another important way of delivering formative assessment is by using rubrics. I'm not so sure if anybody has been using rubrics to support the measurement or tracking of social and emotional skills. Given the time constraint, I think I will skip this, but I just wanted to say this is one of the arguably most promising way and very simple way of measuring the progress of children in a formative fashion, okay? It's very attractive because it's very explicit about what it means by being a very exemplary in terms of perspective taking, right? it makes it very explicit about different stages of social and emotional skill development by using rubrics, okay? You may have seen lots of rubrics that is associated with academic skills, but this is also one area that have seen emergence. So this is what I would like to mention at the end. So this is another example of a very good rubrics that is applied to measure creativity and curiosity. So just coming back, just repeating, it is very important to first think about strategies to address social and emotional learning. It starts with being very clear about the learning objectives, right? Before determining the tools that you would use. And then you move on to the implementation, okay? So it is very important to think about the whole picture. It is very important to think about the ecosystem of social and emotional skill development when thinking about measuring, evaluating social and emotional skills. So this brings me to the end of my presentation, the conclusion, which in few words, yes, is this. Evaluation must be a part of a broader strategy. And both summative and formative assessments play a tremendously important role in fostering foundational skills. I've given you some examples of that. And while there are many different tools to measure social and emotional skills, some of them provide reliable and valid measures. And lastly, I wanted to say schools that are interested in strengthening learners' social and emotional skills are really encouraged to work with educational assessment experts to explore and use these materials, some of the examples that I have provided, to evaluate and foster social and emotional skills. I hope that I managed to convince that the current context of our society bring rise to further the importance of social and emotional skills. So I think there's a need to work on this even harder. The good news is that there are no methodologies to foster social and emotional skills. There are also known instruments to measure and facilitate these skills. And I would really like to see these initiatives flourishing in Colombia in the setting of the private schools. Thank you very much for your attention.
Oye, muchísimas gracias por tu intervención.